We
Yeah.
often think that we need so much to make a difference, but sometimes it can just take a small collective of people who are very passionate about something to just make that difference that we need. So I think
Yeah.
rallying more of people, or yeah, more young people who are already doing it, who are already taking the initiative and amplifying their voices. I always
Mm.
say making the right people famous, not just these
Yes.
TikTokers who dance and all of that. Make the right people popular and famous, and
Yeah.
those people will make a big difference. Don't
Yeah.
take it for granted what a passionate young mind that's speaking about topics that matter can do for other young
Yeah.
people.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Africa Written podcast, where we dive into the voices shaping Africa's present and future. I'm your host, Nonhlanhla, and today we bring you a powerful youth special. Every year on June 16, South Africa remembers the brave youth of 1976 who stood up for justice and freedom. Today we honor that spirit with someone who's doing just that in their own way, healing, leading and standing up for the issues young people are facing today in their new Rainbow South Africa. Joining me is Nonhlanhla Siwela, a passionate, aspiring doctor and a verbal advocate for youth, health, mental well-being and empowerment.
Okay, thanks, Nonhlanhla, for joining me today to discuss such an important topic. Could you just please tell me a bit about yourself and your journey into studying medicine?
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Nonhlanhla Siwela, and I am a 22-year-old medical student at Wits University, currently in my fifth year. And sure, the journey has been very long. As we all know, the journey to becoming a medical doctor is a very long journey.
Yeah.
But I think it started even way before I was in high school. It started when I was a very young girl, and I
Yeah.
just had this heart for helping people and taking care of people. I grew up with a sister who's disabled, and I grew up being the younger sister, but she was the older sister, and I was taking care of her. So the roles were kind of like reversed. And
Yeah.
so for me, I had to grow up really quickly, and I saw the importance of taking care of each other. And as a family, we all had to take on that caretaker role. And so for me, that fostered this love for caring and taking care of people. And I just thought to myself, I want to be able to make a difference in the lives of people who are vulnerable, who are sick, who can't take care of themselves. And so
Yeah.
that's really where it started, way before even high school, choosing subjects and all of that. I always knew from then that I wanted to take care of people. And so by the
Mm.
time high school came and we were discussing careers, it was a thing of, okay, but how do we narrow this down? There are many jobs you can go into where you can take care of people or serve people.
Yeah.
And so I found that one of my favorite subjects was actually life sciences. I
Hmm.
had this really, really deep interest for the human body, especially the human mind. And I used
Mm.
to read a lot of books, like a ridiculous amount of books. My mom will tell you in KZN, like there's a whole bookshelf just for me at the back of the house with all these books I used to collect.
Yeah.
And so I used to really have a huge interest in the human body, the human mind. And
Mm.
I used to even reach out to a lot of women who were in the health field, women who were pioneering very, innovative ways of approaching health. So I think back to even in grade 11 for my life sciences project, we basically had to write a topic that we thought needed to be discussed in life sciences or even in
Yeah.
health. And my
Mm.
topic was basically non conventional ways of approaching women's health, especially in the Black South African context.
Wow.
And my life sciences teacher, she told me that that's the most unique topic she's ever, encountered in all her years of marking these life sciences projects.
Wow.
And
It is.
I essentially was deep diving into how women's health is not invested in enough. I was deep
Mm.
diving in exploring more options for women because a lot of women don't know what their options are. A lot of women feel as though they have to just take care of themselves and take
Yeah.
care of other people, and they never feel like they have avenues to reach out and get the help that they need, especially when things are
Yeah.
happening to their bodies. It's almost as if, well, you're just gonna have to figure it out. So I was just
mm,
arguing in the life sciences project that we need to make women's health more accessible, and we need more avenues and options for women. Women must feel safe and comfortable
mm,
to basically take care of their bodies, and they need to know about their bodies, because
yeah.
historically there hasn't been a lot of information about women's health, women's reproductive system, and there's been also a lot of taboo and a lot of stigma around the female anatomy, as if
Mm,
like women aren't the literal bearers of life, you know.
yeah.
So this vessel that is our body as women is so crucial, so important, because without us no one would even be here. So for
Yes.
me, that's how I look at it. I look at it as we need to start honoring and taking care of women's bodies. We need to start
Mm,
giving credit to women who are in health as well, because they
mm,
do so much. You know, women in gynecology, women in obs and gynae, like they do so much, and it's
yeah.
really underrated and overlooked. And we
Mm-hmm.
need more female doctors, more women in health, you know,
Yeah.
um, to see women, because women will feel more comfortable being seen by a female doctor. You know, there's just too many men in health seeing women, and they don't really understand, you know, the
Yeah.
journey of a woman and a woman's body.
Yeah. True. What is being a young health, or not just a health, just a young activist mean to you? To like today in South Africa, what does that mean to you personally?
I think it really started in high school when
Mm,
I felt as though, because I was a scholarship recipient at
yeah.
a very prestigious all girls private school. And for
Mm,
me, as like a Black Zulu girl, my options are very limited, because I come from a middle class family, and
mm,
my family has always kind of had to sacrifice a lot in terms of finances. Like, as I said,
yeah.
I grew up with a sick sister all my life. And so my family really taught me to be humble and to always live within my means, and
Mm,
to really just understand the concept of ubuntu, and
mm,
to understand the fact that life is not just about yourself. We live in community, and we need to understand that life is nothing without community and without
mm,
people, and without fostering connections with people, and understanding that everyone is on a different walk of life. So for me in
mm,
high school, as a scholarship recipient, it felt as though I was kind of like part of the minority group. I felt very out of place. I felt like there weren't a lot of spaces for girls like me to
yeah.
talk about things, and to talk about how it's like to have to assimilate in a very prestigious white school when you're a Black girl, and you grew
Mm,
up Black, you know, and there's not a lot of you in the school to represent you too. So
yeah.
you feel like you're not represented. So I wanted to take up that space, and I didn't want another grade 8 girl to come into the school and feel like she didn't have representation, to feel the way
Yeah.
I felt when I came in. So
Mm,
I wanted to basically take up space and fulfill that role. And so I
mm.
started something that was called Curious Conversations, where
Okay.
every Monday morning we'd come together and we'd basically just discuss uncomfortable topics, and
Wow.
discuss how we felt about our place in the school, especially as minority groups. And so that's where it really started, the whole activism role. And then I also used to write. So I've always been known to be like a writer, and I used to write
Mm,
poetry and perform my poetry, even for assembly. Like, I used to perform poetry, and it was activist poetry. It used to be basically poetry documenting my journey in
yeah.
the school, and how I felt as a Black girl, and basically finding my place, and
Mm,
everything that was important to me in terms of activism. So topics like racism used to
mm,
come up a lot in my poetry. Topics like not feeling like you fit in as a Black girl used to come up a lot in my poetry. And
mm,
then in grade 11, when the whole thing with Uyinene happened, then
mm.
I started writing poetry about GBV and rape in the country. And
Yeah.
that poetry actually really went far in terms of KZN schools, and people were
Mm,
reading that poetry in assembly, and all of that. And for me, I realized that we need, as young people, to take up that space,
yeah.
because at the end of the day it's our future, and at the end of the day we have really powerful voices. We have so much offered to us that the previous generations didn't have, our parents didn't have. Like with my parents, they didn't grow up as outspoken as we are. You know, my
Mm,
mom always tells me that she didn't grow up being able to share her opinions. And so
mm,
she's always encouraged me to share my opinions, to speak my mind, because we
mm.
have that privilege now. We have that opportunity now. She always
Yeah.
used to tell me that she had to go to, you know, a school elokishini. She never had the opportunity to go to a school as prestigious as I did. She always used to encourage me, take these opportunities with both hands and make the most of these opportunities. You know, it's a privilege. And so for me, I didn't want to just be a student. I didn't just want to be an academic. I wanted to be
Mm,
a student who applied herself in all the opportunities and spaces that she could. I wanted to expand my mind. I wanted to connect with other students. I wanted
mm,
to know about other people's journeys, and I wanted to know, how can I advocate for people who look like me? How can I advocate for other little black girls so that they can also be where I am? And so that's always just been my thing. And even now, I'm always advocating for black women, and I'm
mm,
always advocating for black women to also see through me that it's possible.
mm.
You deserve to take up space. You can speak your mind, be outspoken. Don't be afraid to assert yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess that's where the whole activism thing came in.
Yeah. So you speak about taking up space and how your mother encouraged you to always have your opinion out there. And I noticed that on social media you also have a huge following, and you are always, speaking your mind. So how are you? And also you're part of a podcast. Could you just
Yes.
please talk about that podcast, and how are you using your platform or your voice to raise awareness about issues that women face in this country?
So it was actually quite a shock to me when I started getting a lot of followers, because when I was in high school, I was never actually on social media. I was never big on social media. I was a very almost like conservative type of girl. And
Mm,
so it was more of like my friends who encouraged me, and they were like, oh, there's this new app, TikTok. You know, it was like also during COVID times when
yeah.
all we really had was our phones and social media. So my
Mm,
friends were like, you know, we really benefit a lot from listening to you and from curious conversations.
mm,
So I think like you should expand it to social media, because there's a lot of people our age who would really benefit from hearing these topics, or
mm,
having this space where we can discuss. So then I
yeah.
just started, you know, and I just used to just speak randomly. Like I had no structure to it. It wasn't even like a thing of, oh, I want to be famous on TikTok or
Mm,
anything like
yeah.
that. I was just like, I'll just share my thoughts like I share my thoughts at school, you know?
Mm,
And then I started sharing my thoughts, and then my videos would get so many views that I'd be so shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh. I remember like the first time I saw 5,000 views, I was like, 5,000 people have seen my face and heard my voice, because the school that I'm from is
mm,
very small. So
yeah.
I was like really shocked that 5,000 people had seen that and listened to me. And there were like a
Mm,
lot of comments too. And I was like, oh my gosh, so many people are interacting. And then I kept
mm,
posting, and then the views kept on. And I remember also getting 10K views. I was like, oh my gosh, 10,000 people. And then with that, the followers also increased. And then
yeah.
I just slowly started having more structure, and
Mm,
being a lot more intentional about my videos,
mm,
because I realized that like with the big platform comes so much responsibility.
mhm,
And also the more younger girls would reach out to me and say, Nonhlanhla, watch your videos, you inspire me. I
mm,
realized that I need to constantly set an example through my videos, because I don't know
mm,
who's watching,
yeah.
and who I could be influencing with the things that I'm saying. And
Mm,
yeah, social media is a very big thing in this age, and it's a very powerful tool that we can
mm,
use to either influence people negatively or positively, and to also almost push certain agendas. And so it's very important to me to use my social media platform in a way that is empowering, in a way that's pushing the right agendas, especially to the young mind, because
mm,
young minds are so susceptible to the things that they see on social media. And
yeah.
so for me, it's so important that my platform is constantly intentional, and is constantly to build and to empower, and never to almost like create division or push certain agendas that are very dangerous for young people to be exposed to. You know, we see it a lot, even in terms of little boys and this content called red pill content and the Andrew
Mm,
Tates and these podcasts that are influencing young boys to be misogynistic and to view women
mm,
as objects and things like that. So we've seen how the misuse of your social media platform can really negatively influence young minds. And I don't ever want to be found guilty of that. And then in
mm,
terms of the podcast, so last year I was basically emailed by this amazing group of people, and they basically called Africa Insight, and they basically told me about this idea that they had where they wanted social media activists
mm,
who are women of color to basically host this podcast called That's What She Said. And
mhm.
it's basically to amplify the voice of women and young girls and to speak about topics that we feel needs to be spoken about, and
Yeah.
to empower young girls, especially in the South African context. So some of the topics that we covered and the ones that I hosted were about women in STEM, women in
Yeah.
non-traditional roles, women
Mm,
who want to be independent but still want to be feminine, and how you can be a multifaceted woman. You don't need
mhm.
to conform to a certain perception of woman. You can
Yeah.
embrace all there is to you as a woman. You can express yourself in many different ways, whatever feels true
Mhm.
to you. It was just a podcast to kind of like be a safe space for girls to learn, to share how they feel about navigating this world and
Yeah.
navigating growing up and all of that. And we just covered a whole range of topics. Even climate
Mm,
change came in,
yeah.
even art as a form of expression came in. We had
Mm,
Amara Brown as one of the hosts, and she is a very
yeah.
prominent musician. So it was
Yeah.
really amazing to have all these different aspects to the podcast that really
Mm,
represented many different ways of being a woman, you know.
yeah.
And so that happened, and then we almost like wrapped it up, and we finished the season. And then this year they reached out to me again, and they said, we want to start a new season and we
Mhm.
want you to be the lead, and it's about
Okay.
women's health. And so the
Yeah.
title of this season is called What the Health. And so,
Okay. Nice.
yeah, I just discuss basically health topics that I feel like
Mhm.
young people really need to know about. So, part of it is also very like women's health centered, but
Yeah.
there's also general topics that I feel very strongly about, like raising awareness about STIs and STDs
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
practicing safe sex, and talking about these topics that are considered to be taboo, like menstruation,
Yeah.
and what health
Yeah.
is and how health is framed in black households. So
Yeah.
how we kind of don't have good health seeking behavior, because as black people we often wait until we're literally at the brink of death to go seek health services. And so
Yes.
it's about how we perceive health and how we need to encourage each other to take care of our bodies, to take care of our health. How do we take charge of it? How do we be proactive, you know,
Mm,
as black people in terms of our health, because we
yeah.
are the ones that are hit the most in terms of, you know, HIV rates and all of that. So how do we prevent before something happens? Because prevention is better than cure. It's like
Yeah.
literally one of the biggest principles in medicine. So I
Yeah.
also bring my medical student side to things, because I have the privilege of knowing a lot in that sense.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's like relatable, and it's like speaking to young people. So it's very easy for young people to understand.
Yeah. Okay. That's exciting. I'm looking forward to listening
Thank
to the What the
you.
Health podcast. So, what
Do you think are some of the health challenges that South African women face today?
Because if you just think about the healthcare system in general and how it's failing people, if you think of public
Mm,
healthcare,
yeah.
especially now in my clinical years where we're rotating in the hospitals, it's really
Yeah.
heartbreaking to see the standard of healthcare that majority of people in this country are being subjected to. And so, particularly with women, I feel as though a lot of women don't know much about the health services that are offered to them or that can be
Mm,
offered to them. So one of
yeah.
the videos that I started making was about HPV, which is
Yeah.
an STI that you get, and it is implicated in cervical cancer in women. So
Yeah.
it's literally implicated in 90% of cases of cervical cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically was making a video to encourage women to get the vaccine,
Yeah.
because I knew that a lot of women or a lot of girls don't know about the HPV vaccine,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to protect themselves, and they don't know how to access the preventative measures,
Yeah.
right? But yet they are the ones that are going to be hit by cervical cancer. So for me, I made those videos encouraging girls, hey, do you know about the HPV vaccine? Do you know what HPV is? Do you know what it does to women's bodies? Do you know that if you do get the cancer strain, you're likely to then develop cervical cancer? But it's all preventable. And there was even an article years ago that was highlighting how a lot of cervical cancer cases in South Africa are because women haven't taken the preventative measures, not
Mm.
because they have been primarily just developed the disease. It's actually a
Mm.
lot about the prevention.
Yeah.
So when I read that article, I thought to myself, well, we need to raise awareness.
Yeah.
How many girls know about this? Not many. I didn't know about it until I became a medical student, you see. So I
Yeah.
only got vaccinated last year. So you see, there's a lot of girls who don't know
Mm.
the avenues and the ways to prevent things and the ways to access healthcare. A lot of
Yeah.
girls also ask me questions about contraceptives. Are they safe? And all of that. And I made also another series of videos talking about how unsafe contraceptives are and how they're detrimental to women's bodies and how we need
Mm.
better options in
Yeah.
healthcare. So that's another topic that I've discussed before and I think is very
Mm.
important.
Yeah.
And even things about like being a childless woman, because for so long women have been pressured into having children, and you
Mm-hmm.
always hear things like your biological clock is ticking
It's
and all
ticking.
of that, and you feel this pressure to become a mother.
Yeah.
But being a mother entails so much responsibility on a woman, and
Mm.
it's a very heavy burden that women carry. And now in the modern day, it's actually you are able to wait. You can wait to be a mother. There are so many options now, but a lot of women don't maybe know about that. And it's
Mm.
been a game changer for a lot of women who want to first pursue their careers, who want to first discover themselves and travel and
Yeah.
do all these things before they become mothers. And so there are a lot of options, but women don't know about them, right? Or
Yeah.
even if you don't want to have children at all, what are your options? Tubal ligation and sterilization and things like that,
Mm.
like a permanent means of never getting pregnant. So there
Yeah.
are these options that we don't know about, but they're
Mm.
actually available and they've been developed in the modern world. So it's all about raising awareness, providing information, and helping women basically bridge the gap in their
Yeah.
knowledge about
Mm.
themselves and their health and their bodies.
Yeah. Oh, okay. In one of my podcasts, I spoke to an expert, and she was speaking about how a gentleman could not take his diabetes medication because he couldn't afford food.
Mm,
So he couldn't take it. And that's just one of the examples of many challenges that people in this country face. How do you
yeah.
then think that social and economic factors impact specifically women's access to healthcare services in South Africa?
Mm. I think with a lot of women, because they
Mm,
also have, well, in like the traditional Black household, a lot of
yeah,
Black women, especially, are bearing this burden of taking care of the children,
yeah,
and it's very difficult for them to then travel to the hospital, because a lot of women that I see in the hospital will tell me, I can't leave my kids at home. I don't know
mm,
who's going to be taking care of my kids. I really need to get back to my kids. So that
mm,
worry comes even before her health. She
yeah,
could literally be in such a dire situation in terms of her health, but she is worried about her children. And
yeah,
so that is a big thing as well, is that a lot of women, even when they are not well, they will delay coming to the hospital because they feel as though there's no one who's going to take care of their children. Who are they going to leave their
yeah,
children with? And who's going to
mm,
provide for their children? There's a lot of single motherhood in South Africa.
Yeah.
The fatherlessness crisis is another article that was written to highlight the single motherhood burden of parenting and how that affects women, and how
Yeah.
that also plays a role in their mental health, because we actually know that our mental health plays a huge role in our physical health. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people overlook that, right? Stress is a very big implicator in terms of your predisposition to becoming sick.
Yeah.
It lowers your immune system, it predisposes you to cancer, right? So
Mm-hmm.
things like that we overlook, especially in the sense of being a woman. You feel like you have to be strong and you have to bear a lot of responsibility, and so you're
Yeah.
always stressed, but you always have to kind of like contain that, and keep your cool, and not really feed into it. A lot of women are so stressed out, and that affects their health, that affects their hormones, so there's a lot that plays into health, and it plays into accessing health. It's not just someone getting from their home to the hospital. It's also about someone's socioeconomic position, someone's mental health, someone's
Mm-hmm.
situation at home. Who are they living with? Um, Even in terms of kids who I've seen in the hospital, who were like diabetics, and then they would say that at home we don't have electricity, so they can't store their medication in the fridge, and so we need to look at other options for them, because that situation is not going to be solved easily. I mean,
Yeah.
other kids who would come in, and they have like asthma, and they need home oxygen, but they don't have electricity. Or
Electricity.
even
Yeah.
other women who would come in with chronic lung disease, and they say they
Mm.
need home oxygen, but there's no electricity, they don't have stable electricity supply. And
Yeah.
even the fact that the environment that people are living in majority of the black population, it's very unsanitary. Like the
Yeah.
water is not sanitary, and it's not really feasible for being healthy, right? A lot of people are living in situations where they're living with a lot of people, and things
Yeah.
like TB are spread easily and stuff like that. We're not all as privileged enough to live in like a standalone house or in a nice,
Yeah.
cute complex, So that's also part of it. There's so many factors that we need to consider when it comes to access to health, and even in terms of women. I
Yeah.
think about the women that I see in the hospital a lot.
Mm. Yeah. You already spoke about how a lot of people don't have access to information, like how you spoke about HPV, things like that. Do you think that young women are well informed about issues like menstrual health, maternal care, sexual and reproductive rights, or
Mm,
do they care enough to know
mm.
about these issues, or is it just a matter of not having information?
I think it's a matter of not having information and growing up feeling like these things are taboo, and growing
Mm,
up feeling shame about these
yeah,
things. Like there's a lot of negative connotations about being on your period or menstruating. Like you're
yeah,
almost made to feel like you're dirty during that time. You should be
mm,
discreet about it. You should hide it. All of these things. And so a lot of girls aren't comfortable to ask questions. They feel like, is this not an embarrassing question,
yeah,
and I've seen it because a lot of girls reach out to me and they
mm,
say, I'm so glad I have this avenue. I'm so glad there's
yeah,
people like you I can speak to, because I don't feel comfortable speaking
yeah,
to anyone else. Some girls even say they don't feel comfortable speaking to their own mothers. So
yeah,
I think it's all about creating a safe space, and it's all about making the information accessible, because there aren't a lot of people who are speaking directly to young girls or speaking directly to women about their reproductive health.
yeah,
There's not a lot of people who are speaking about sexual health. There's not a
mm,
lot of people who are going to blatantly say we can't just worry about pregnancy, we also need to worry about STIs and STDs,
yeah,
because a lot of people only think the worst thing that can happen is pregnancy.
mm,
But actually, especially for women, if you get repeated sexually transmitted infections, you can become infertile. It's
mm,
so detrimental to your body as a woman. And
mm,
so we don't even know a lot about that either, right? We're just told don't get pregnant. We're just told make sure that you don't get HIV, but we
Mm.
also need to talk about everything else around that. So there's
Yeah.
not a lot of people talking about it. There's not a lot of people championing these
Yeah.
conversations. I do
Yeah.
feel as though, especially as the youth, we don't care enough about the topics that matter. A
Yeah.
lot of us are too consumed in social media culture, and social media culture is all about how can we make money fast, how can we seem cool and popular to the
Mm.
masses. And then amidst all of that, we don't have intellectually and mentally stimulating conversations that matter, especially about topics that affect us the most, right? We are the generation that's going to have to start families. We are the generation that's going to be buying houses now, buying
Yeah.
cars now, building the country, contributes to the economy. It's not far away, right? I'm 22, but life is moving so fast. By next year, I'm graduating, I'm going to be a doctor. So you see, I feel as though we're not cognizant of time. We're
Yeah.
very much like, oh, I still have time. I'm in my 20s, life is bliss. I'm going to care about all these things later. So we don't talk about the things that matter. And by the
Yeah.
time it catches up to us, we're going to regret and look back and say, we wish we had spoken about these things. So I
Mm.
do think it's also, yeah, caring plays a role, and also just not having enough of people who are speaking about these things and creating the
Yeah.
spaces for us to speak about these things.
Then, how do we encourage young people to be more engaged in public health issues? How do we do that?
It's very difficult. I won't lie. It's very difficult. Um, I think you need to reach out to the young people who are already enthusiastic about it, who are
Yeah.
already championing the conversations, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really great that, for example, you have reached out to me so that you can amplify my voice. And
Yeah.
even the That's What She Said podcast and Africa Insight, and them reaching out to young women who are
Mm.
activists so that
Yeah.
they can amplify our voices. I think that's so
Yeah.
important. It's very empowering because it takes actually a small group of people with a common cause to make a big difference. We often
Yeah.
think that we need so much to make a difference, but sometimes it can just take a small collective of people who are very passionate about something to just make that difference that we need. So I think
Yeah.
rallying more of people, or yeah, more young people who are already doing it, who are already taking the initiative and amplifying their voices. I always
Mm.
say making the right people famous, not just
Yes.
these TikTokers who dance and all of that. Make the right people popular and famous, and
Yeah.
those people will make a big difference. Don't
Yeah.
take it for granted. What a passionate young mind that's speaking about topics that matter can do for other young
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Because if there's a lot of us and we get rallied up and our voices get amplified, then we are the people who are more receptive and who are more likely to reach the audience that we're trying to target, which is the young people. So like a young person is more likely to want to kind of listen to me,
Yeah.
and they might be a little bit opposed to it at first, like, oh, why is she now talking about serious things? But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, they're going to listen, you see. So it matters. Even if they not initially very receptive to it, it's just the fact that they're seeing young people saying things that they're not used to hearing. It makes them curious, and they are bound to listen. So the more voices like mine or like other prominent young activists that we amplify, the better for the youth at large.
Yeah. What challenges do young activists like yourself face when they're trying to make their voices heard?
I think we face a lot of negative backlash from our age group. And it's
Yeah.
very discouraging when, like, people that you're trying to appeal to make fun of you and tell you that
Mm.
you're being too serious, and why you trying to seem smarter than all of us, and all of these things that they say to almost discourage you. I think that's
Mm.
one of the biggest things, is when people in your own age group are
Mm.
discouraging you and are
Yeah.
kind of being the enemy of progress. And then I think also the fact that, in as much as we feel like we're the generation that has the freedom of speech now, and we can raise awareness and we can speak our minds and we can advocate and all of that, at the end of the day, higher up is still the very conservative older generation, and they're the
Mm,
ones that actually have the power to enact the change. So it feels like when we're speaking to them, we're basically speaking to walls.
yeah.
Like, in as much as we can finally win over our age group and people in our age group and the youth, then the next big task is to win over the older generation that can actually enact the difference,
Mm,
that are sitting in seats where they're making policies that matter, where they have to authorize certain things that we're trying to advocate for. And so if they don't listen, if they don't support us, it's almost like redundant. It's almost like useless for us to keep speaking. I always
mm,
say that we can speak as much as we want, but what matters the most is what happens after we've spoken. So
yeah.
if after we've spoken, nothing changes in terms of policies, in terms of, like,
Mm,
I think back to elections and how there was a huge concerted effort to get the youth involved in elections. And I
yeah.
was part of the youth activists that were encouraging young people to vote, and also spreading voter education and
Yeah.
helping younger people understand the different manifestos. And even ENCA reached out to me and featured me on one of their TV shows to
Yeah.
basically encourage young people to give my opinion on the elections. And so that felt like it was going to make a difference. But then when voting came around and the results came around, we saw that
Mm,
even if young people are trying to be involved in this, and even if young
yeah.
people feel like they can make the difference and almost overturn the government that's been in power for so long, it's not
Yeah.
really as possible as we think it is if we don't have the support of the older generation that actually can make the difference, you see, that can
Mm,
enact
mm,
the difference rather. So sure, raising awareness and educating and speaking makes a difference, but when it's the broader sense of difference, when it's the biggest in the bigger picture, higher up, we also need the support of the government. We need the support of the highest superiors and officials and the people
yeah.
in authoritarian positions to actually support us. So I feel like that's a very, very big obstacle in our way. Is also balancing being a student being a student and being in your 20s and trying to figure
Yeah.
life out, and also
Mm-hmm.
trying to make a difference. Like,
Yeah.
activism is a huge responsibility. It also weighs very heavily on your mental health. And
Yeah.
it's almost like you kind of envy your peers who don't care, who aren't
Yeah.
worrying about that. All they're doing is just figuring out their 20s. And then you get
Yeah.
you who's trying to pursue qualification at the same time. You're trying to be an activist at the same time. So
Mhm.
it's also that too, the fact that it's such a huge responsibility, and
Yeah.
it really affects you, takes a lot out of you mentally, and you're still
Mm.
also in your 20s trying to figure things out.
So earlier on, you spoke about women not having access to certain health care facilities that they need, and at some point, I attended some meeting on sexual and health reproductive rights, and a lot of women were talking about how they don't have a lot of options when it comes to family planning in South Africa, like in public
Mm,
clinics. If you go there,
mm,
sometimes you get an injection, and maybe that's not what you prefer, but that's what available at the time.
mm.
And you might come back 2 months later, and what's available is maybe pills, and so you get what is available at that time, and that is problematic, obviously, because they were complaining about that. So, what changes would you like to see in our health system to better, serve young people?
Yeah, I do agree 100% that there really
Mm.
aren't a lot of options. And
Yeah,
especially as a medical student, you learn about, like, for example, okay, so when it comes to family planning, these are all
yeah,
the options available that you educate your patient about. Then you actually go
yeah,
into the South African public hospital and you realize all these options I learned about aren't even there, you
yeah,
know? And like you'll even speak to a doctor and they'll ask you, okay, so here's a patient, this is what they're
Yeah.
asking for. What would
Mm,
you prescribe, or what, how would you advise the patient, how would you educate the patient? You'll say
mm,
what you've learned, and then they say, well, okay, yes, maybe if you had the resources, that would be definitely the best way, but because we're in a resource limited setting, you have to narrow it down. We have to
yeah.
kind of improvise, we have to take what we have and all of that. And it's really detrimental, and it's not fair, because in the constitution it details that people have the right to quality healthcare, not just
Yeah.
healthcare, but quality healthcare.
Quality.
And that's not quality healthcare. If we have to mix and match and work with what we have, it's not quality. It's not tailored to the
Mm,
patient in front of you, you see. And especially when it comes to women's health and things like family planning, where contraceptives have hormones in them, if you
mm,
are constantly being subjected to using all these different hormonal contraceptives, it
yeah.
messes up your hormones, you know, because you're supposed to be on a consistent plan
Yeah.
that suits your body the best. So if you're constantly having to be on different options, it
Yeah.
actually in the long run is way more detrimental for you than if you hadn't even had those injections or those pills. And it's
Yeah.
sad because family planning is crucial, especially in our
Mm.
setting. It's crucial, but it's something that we can't provide for in healthcare.
What's your message to policymakers, communities, and fellow youth when it comes to building a healthier South Africa?
My message is, please listen to us.
Yeah.
Please listen to us. I think they don't really listen. I feel
Yeah.
like we are speaking a lot, but it's falling on deaf ears. And I think especially listen to young people, because young people are really making the effort to learn about the context that they're living in. Young people
Yeah.
are really informing themselves. Young people are really curious, and young people are really passionate about enacting change. So when they're not listened to, it's very discouraging, and then they feel silenced. And I
Yeah.
also think that policymakers need to reconsider how they go about putting people in positions of power, because
Yeah.
it's been very questionable for the last 30 years. It's been very questionable who is leading us, who is being put in these positions of power, but where is that power leading us to? You know, we
Yeah.
haven't seen much of a difference in our country in the last 30 years, and it's shocking. 3 whole decades, you know. So I really wish that they could reconsider who they are allowing to hold these really important positions, because it quite
Yeah.
literally translates to people's livelihoods, people's health.
What are you most looking forward to after graduating? And you can also maybe talk about what are you looking forward to talking about in the new season of the podcast?
I think what I'm looking forward to most is firstly financial freedom.
Yeah.
I'm sure my parents are really tired of paying my medical school fees. They are ridiculously expensive. Can't wait to relieve my parents. I'm very grateful for all
Yeah.
the sacrifices they've made, and I can't wait
Yeah.
to make them proud. And I can't
Yeah.
wait to give back to not just my parents, but to my community. I do
Yeah.
think financial freedom is extremely powerful, especially as a
Yeah.
Black person. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to growing into my womanhood. And I'm really looking forward to being able to actually make a difference in healthcare, because I'm very hopeful about that. I really do
Yeah.
think that when I become a doctor, I'm not just going to be another doctor. I really
Mhm.
am going to challenge myself to be a doctor that makes a difference,
Yeah.
not just in terms of the healthcare system and how I carry out procedures and how I treat patients, but even in how I kind of advocate for patients and advocate for us to see health as more of a multifaceted thing, rather than
Yeah.
just simply the patient is coming to the hospital for treatment. Because as I said, there are so many interlocking factors that play a role, especially in our
Yeah.
context. And especially
Mm.
for women's health, I want to be an advocate. And I feel that once I have my qualification, it will give me more of the capacity to do so.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
No
for this
problem.
conversation. And, just keep talking on social media about important topics. There's
Thank
definitely an
you.
audience that is behind you and is listening. Thank you so much for taking part in this episode.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
As we reflect on Youth Day, let's remember that the fight for freedom didn't end in 1976. Today it lives on in young people raising their voices for women's health, for justice, and for a more equal South Africa. Thank you for tuning in. Let today be a reminder that the power to shape tomorrow lies in the hands of our youth. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.